Hi, I'm Evelyn, your personal therapist and yoga instructor, and today I'm talking about concussion and the rehabilitation that's involved, and I'm going to be drawing on some of my own experiences and some of the things that I wish I'd done differently. So I have 6 tips to get you started. So the first thing that's really important is early intervention with a trained clinician, and this is the best predictor of a recovery for concussion or to reduce the time frame of a prolonged concussion. So in my experience, it was actually quite difficult to find somebody and to find the right clinicians, and I ended up with about 11 to 15 different ones over a 12-month period. That amount has reduced at the moment, but I recommend finding some support groups and really using that word of mouth and recommendations. In terms of neurologists, all the feedback that I got from asking other people who had experienced concussions were that neurologists really weren't up to scratch and up to date with treatment for concussion, and they were only able to read MRIs and treat based on what they show. However, concussions or prolonged concussions don't show up on an MRI. The brain I've spoke about in previous videos, it's knocked inside the head, so it wobbles and it hits the outside of the head, and there's shearing, and that can cause bruising, and then it can actually just set off a neurological reaction, but it's too small to show up on an MRI. Some of the clinicians who've really helped me were neurophysiotherapists who specialized in concussion. I now have a chiropractor who also specializes in neuro rehab and concussion, and he's doing a lot of things for my vision and balance and other musculoskeletal issues. So that process can take a while. I remember in the beginning, I was on the waiting list to get into a concussion clinic, and while I was waiting, I really didn't want to lose that early intervention phase, so I started doing some things myself to try and get moving on concussion recovery, because I knew how important it was for early intervention. So the second thing I highly recommend is taking time off. This is something I wish I had done. I never stopped working, and I really should have just taken 3 weeks off, because most concussions will heal in 3 weeks, but a way to potentially prolong it is to not stop and rest when the brain needs to recover. So while it is important to keep doing some things, the type of job that I was in that's highly sensorily demanding and just working in general can be really tiring as it is without a concussion. I wish I'd taken some time off. I had a lot of momentum built in the role, and it actually took my head, like my mindset, a while to accept that I had a condition, that I needed to rest and I needed to stop. So I wish I'd done that earlier, and that's something I highly recommend doing, is to just stop everything for about 3 weeks and only focus on a few small things that are related to early intervention for concussion. The third thing I recommend is, while you're taking time off, at least try to walk 10 to 20 minutes per day, and it's like at that moderate level of exercise where it's about 100 beats per minute if you have that heart rate monitor on one of your devices, but in my case I didn't use one. It's just that level of walking where you're a bit breathless, but you could still talk to someone while you're walking and not be uncomfortably out of breath. We want to do that 5, 10, 20 minutes would be ideal per day, but some people's concussion is so severe they can't do it. I understand there's some really severe levels of light sensitivity that people can't even handle sitting in a dimly lit room. So people are dealing with those kind of issues, and that's where things like treadmills might be a better idea, or some sort of exercise that just to move around, to move the body each day, because you don't want to completely resign to the condition. My fourth tip is breath work. So even if you can just sit for 5 minutes and do breathing 3 times a day. I was doing this at work. So I would see a patient and then I'd go and remove myself and sit down and do some breath work. I was having an issue where I was getting anxiety in the absence of worry. So I was enjoying my job, but my nervous system would get really wound up and I'd start getting breathless. And this is just my nervous system under strain because I was in a sensorily demanding environment, lots of light, noise, lots of dynamic thinking, or, oh, I'm doing this, or now I need to do that. Just keeping on changing what I was doing all the time. My nervous system couldn't cope with that and I would get really wound up. Simple breath work, even for 5 minutes, can get you back into your parasympathetic nervous system, turn off those alarm bells of the amygdala and get you back on track. I recommend doing this even if you're having time off at home, 5 minutes 3 times a day, or even just once a day, or a longer session once a day. Highly recommended. My 5th tip is an anti-inflammatory diet. Again, you need professional advice to undertake dietary changes. As a blanket rule that you can start doing without professional advice is to stop eating processed foods. This is frozen meals, takeaway, anything that's hot, like full of salt, sugar, and oil, basically. So if you can home make your meals and balanced meals that have fruits, vegetables, and proteins, that's a really good start. Don't starve yourself. In terms of diet, so some people lose their appetite. For me, I was eating more and I was reaching for high caloric foods. I felt like crap, and it's really common for us when we're in those initial phases when we're feeling exhausted and like crap, and we reach for those high caloric density foods. And that's because they give us a little bit of a boost just for those few minutes a day. Try and avoid doing that. Once I realized I really needed to stop doing it, I've stopped, and it's definitely made a huge difference. I went to True North Health Center in California. They put me on a plant-based, salt, oil, and sugar-free diet. This is something that I'm not advising. I'm just sharing this is what I did and that it really helped. Please find someone that's right for you. And there are clinicians out there who specialize in concussion and diets for concussion. One thing I would also start doing straight away is taking magnesium every day. Now, the magnesium that's common in the supermarkets isn't necessarily the best one. The one I'm on is a magnesium threonate. There's a couple of other ones that are more specific to the brain and executive functioning. So get some advice on those, but it doesn't hurt to just take any magnesium in the meantime. The 6th thing, I sort of already mentioned it earlier, is to join support groups, but don't get too involved. So I joined a local one, which I find the most helpful. It's just Australians, and it's helpful because other people have been through the workers' comp and the traffic accident commission process, and you can get help and advice, and people in there are generally really helpful, and the group is used for what it's intended to be used for. I'm also in a global group, and that group I find can be actually depressing and bring me down a bit. So I found myself seeing those posts and looking at the posts all the time of people just writing posts about these awful scenarios, people just in terrible situations with these really extreme symptoms and no support, no doctors, like from all around the world. And it's depressing and it's draining. So it's really good to be aware of it, and it's good if you want to do a post and get some support, but try not to get too sucked into those groups and reading and writing it all the time, because that pulls you away from your rehab. So that's my top tips for today. I will go into further detail in other videos, just breaking things down step by step with actual rehab pathways. And what I mean by that is if it's vestibular, if it's just your neck, if it's light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. Again, I'm not a neurological doctor. I'm not trained specifically to give neurological advice. I'm just sharing information that's helped me, that's generally safe. So if you like this video, please like, follow me, subscribe. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.